was nothing, just the thick, unyielding fog. By the third lap, the feeling had only worsened. My skin prickled, my heartbeat quickened. And then, footsteps, faint but distinct, following me. I stopped, listened. Silence. I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe the fog was playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I decided to take a break, sitting down on a bench near the playground. That's when I heard it. A rustling sound, like someone stepping on dry leaves. My pulse spiked. I shot up, scanning the area. Is someone there? My voice was small, unsteady. No answer. Just the suffocating fog. Then, laughter, software hollow, too close. And then she stepped out. A woman, tall and gaunt, with tangled red hair hanging in limp strands around her face. She wore a torn white nightgown, stained with something dark. My eyes slowly traced upwards until I met hers. Bloodshot, wild. Mascara smeared down her cheeks as if she had been crying for hours. I couldn't move. My breath caught in my throat. She smiled, but there was nothing warm about it. And then, I saw her hand. She was clutching something. A finger. A severed human finger. Blood dripped from it, staining the snow at her feet. A wedding ring dangled loosely from the pale, lifeless flesh. My stomach churned. My vision blurred. I stumbled back, crashing to the ground. The woman let out another hollow laugh. "He's single now," she whispered, raising the finger higher. "No more secrets, no more lies." Before I could even process her words, her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed onto the ground beside me. For a moment, I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. Then, somehow, I snapped out of it. My hands fumbled for my phone, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. The police arrived within minutes, though it felt like hours. They took the woman away, but not before telling me the truth. Her name was Sophia. She was an artist who had killed her husband while he slept, convinced he was having an affair with his secretary. Afterward, she severed his ring finger and wandered the streets in a daze. I later found out she never spoke again after that night. And me? I never jog in the mornings anymore. In 2021, my life took an unexpected turn. I was 23 years old and worked at a car service in a small town in Florida. I didn't go to college. There was neither the money nor the opportunity. I had this job and a bit of hope for the future. Everything changed when Jake started working with us. At first, he seemed like a decent guy, polite, always smiling, and quickly blending into the team. We started talking more, exchanged phone numbers, and connected on social media. I thought nothing of it at first, but soon his behavior began to change. He kept asking me what I was doing on the weekends and suggesting we hang out after work. At first, it seemed innocent, but it began to make me uncomfortable. I wasn't sure how to react to his growing interest. One evening, Jake messaged me on Instagram, asking me out to dinner. I politely declined, explaining I wasn't interested. But that didn't stop him. He kept messaging me, asking where I was and who I was with. It started to feel overwhelming. Why did he care so much about my every move? It unsettled me. Jake's behavior became more intrusive. One day, I came home and saw him standing at my doorstep. He had this strange smile on his face, and I realized something wasn't right. I tried talking to him, telling him that I didn't appreciate his behavior, but he didn't leave. He just stared at me as if he had every right to be there. The next morning, I found that Jake had added me on another social media platform after I blocked him. His messages were bizarre, making no sense at all. I blocked him again, but it didn't stop. He kept making new accounts to reach out. I felt like I was being stalked. I deactivated all my social media accounts, hoping that would end it. But one night I heard knocking on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw him, Jake. I knew something was wrong. I stayed quiet, but he kept knocking and eventually said, "If you don't open the door, we'll have problems." I immediately told him I had a gun and called 911. The police arrived quickly. I explained everything to them and they went to his house. They warned him to leave me alone, but I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The next morning, Jake was back at my house. This time, the police caught him. They arrested him, and during interrogation, Jake admitted he'd been to my house several times, taking pictures and collecting details from everything I posted online. He seemed convinced I was just too shy to admit my feelings for him. The situation felt like a nightmare. Why would he think I'd want to date him after I had told him no countless times? His obsession with me was terrifying. Jake was charged with harassment and stalking, facing up to 15 years in prison and a fine. I just hoped I wouldn't have to worry about him anymore. One cold autumn evening, which could have passed like any other, changed my life forever. Through the fogged-up windows of my tiny apartment, with broken heaters and peeling paint, the rain was pouring down when I opened my email and found a dreadful message. Notice of termination. I couldn't believe it. How? Why? Thoughts swirled in my head. This was it. The rent was 2 months overdue, and Lena, my landlord, gave me a deadline, a week to pay the debt or I'd be evicted. My savings were gone. Faced with the harsh reality of being unemployed in Los Angeles, I knew things were critical. I was desperate. I had to find something, anything. After hours of browsing job ads that promised nothing but disappointment, I finally stumbled upon something that seemed like a lifeline, a massage parlor hiring. The pay seemed decent, and they only assigned one client a day. Less work, more money. It felt perfect. Maybe too perfect. But I was desperate, so I clicked apply. To my surprise, the reply was almost instant. The very next morning, I arrived at the address. It was a small, nondescript building squeezed between a boarded-up deli and a laundromat with flickering neon lights. A petite blonde woman greeted me at the door with a smile that seemed far too wide. "Are you Tyra?" she asked, eyes gleaming. "Yes, I am," I replied, nervous. She nodded. "You must be Daphne." She didn't wait for a response, just turned and beckoned me inside. She led me down a narrow hallway to a dimly lit room at the back. The air was thick with the scent of lavender, and something else I couldn't quite place, something metallic. A chill crawled up my spine as I took in my surroundings. The room was small, with heavy curtains blocking out any natural light. In the middle of the room, a massage table stood, and on it lay a man. He looked old, frail, his white hair stark against the dark sheets. "His shoulders are very sore," Daphne said, motioning toward the man. "Just focus on that." I nodded, trying to ignore the tight knot in my chest. But then she added, almost in a whisper, "One more thing. You have to work barefoot." Why?" I asked, genuinely confused. "It's a rule," she said, as though it were the most normal thing in the world. My skin prickled, but I smiled and agreed. I slipped off my shoes, the cold tile sending a shiver through my body. As I moved toward the man, I introduced myself, trying to ease the tension in my gut. But he didn't respond. His labored breathing and soft whimpers filled the room as I began massaging his shoulders. Time seemed to slow, and the room felt colder, the silence suffocating. Half an hour passed without incident, but then the lights flickered. The room was suddenly bathed in a crimson glow, casting eerie shadows everywhere. My heart skipped a beat. And then I heard it. At first, faint, but then growing louder. Children's voices singing nursery rhymes. Their laughter echoed off the walls, sending a chill down my spine. Something about it felt wrong. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. My mind raced with terrible thoughts. Suddenly, I felt something cold and wet against my feet. I gasped and jerked my foot back, looking down. Expecting to see water, I was horrified to see a thin, viscous liquid pooling around my toes. My stomach churned. What was this place? Why did everything about it feel wrong? "Don't," a raspy voice growled from the table. "Mr. Granger." I stumbled back, my tray of oil crashing to the floor. I froze, torn between the urge to escape and the overwhelming curiosity to understand what was happening. Slowly, I bent down and peered under the table. And there he was, his face twisted into a grotesque grin, his eyes wide with a sickening gleam. His mouth, dripping with saliva, was fixed on my feet. He was drooling on them, savoring it like some twisted fantasy. My blood ran cold. Panic set in as the room seemed to close in around me. Without thinking, I bolted toward the door. My feet slipped on the cold tile as I fumbled for the handle. The children's laughter grew louder, more distorted, like something out of a nightmare. I finally wrenched the door open and ran down the hallway, not daring to look back. I didn't stop until I was outside. I didn't even stop to grab my shoes. I ran barefoot through the streets, my heart pounding. The parlor called me several times after that, but I never answered. I packed a bag and moved in with my brother, crashing on his couch while I looked for a new job, one that didn't involve creepy old men with disgusting fantasies. But even now, the memory of that day follows me. Sometimes, late at night, I hear the faint echo of children's laughter, and I wonder if I'll ever truly escape it.